The permissive operating system develops in a childhood environment where identity is built on external recognition rather than on an internal foundation. This is the environment where the child was told he was exceptional, where his natural gifts were praised and his limitations were minimized. The result is a person who is genuinely gifted, often charismatic, often compelling, but structurally dependent on the external validation to maintain his sense of self. Not because he's weak, because his internal foundation that should have been built in his childhood was replaced by a mirror. He learned to see himself through other people's eyes. Dr. Alice Miller, a Swiss psychologist whose landmark work, The Drama of the Gifted Child, is considered one of the most important books in developmental psychology on the emotional lives of high-achieving individuals. She spent her career studying exactly this pattern. Miller found that children who are repeatedly told they are extraordinary without given a stable internal foundation develop what she describes as a false self, a performance-based identity that requires external affirmation to remain intact. Her research found that these children, however successful they become in adulthood, carry a persistent inner emptiness that achievement alone cannot fill. And she argued that this pattern, invisible in childhood and easily mistaken for confidence, produces some of the most stubborn and painful adult psychological struggles, precisely because the person experiencing them cannot imagine that success surrounding him is not the source of the problem. He's looking at his accomplishments and asking, why is this not enough? And the answer is not that he needs more accomplishment. The answer is that he's been trying to fill a childhood void with adult achievements, and that substitution will never work. Not because the achievements are not real, because they are answering the wrong question. The question was never, am I successful? The question was always, am I enough? And no career outcome can answer that question. Only the inner foundation can. So in the description below, you'll find a link to a longer video and notes on the research. Here is the emotional profile. The first emotion is emptiness. When the recognition stops, or when it is insufficient, or when it comes from sources that do not feel significant enough, there is nothing underneath to hold the identity in place. The permissive leader experiences this as a kind of flatness, not depression necessarily, more like the sense that something that should be there isn't. I want to talk to you about entitlement, because in the permissive profile, entitlement is almost always present and is almost always misunderstood. When we see entitlement from the outside, we read it as arrogance, as a person who thinks he is better than everyone else and does not want to do what others have to do. That reading is not entirely wrong, but it is missing the most important layer. Entitlement in permissive OS is not arrogance for its own sake. It is a defense mechanism. Specifically, it is defense against the terror of being ordinary. If this man is not exceptional, then what is he? The operating system has no answer to that question. The entire identity is built on exceptionality, exceptionalism. So when the exceptionalism is threatened, the malware deploys entitlement as a shield. This is not a character flaw. It is the malware defending the only identity it knows. And the upgrade is not learning to be less arrogant. It is building an identity that does not require the exceptionalism to be intact in order to feel safe. The malware says, I should not have to work this hard for it. This is beneath what I am capable of. They clearly do not understand what they have. The third emotion is envy. For the permissive leader, recognition is experienced as a finite resource. When someone else is seen, something feels like it was taken away from him. When a peer is promoted, when a colleague is praised, when someone else commands the room, there is a reaction, a contradiction, a comparison, a quiet, sharp sense of being diminished. The fourth emotion is rage, specifically the rage that comes when recognition is withheld by someone who should be able to see his value. This is not surface irritation. This is a deeper current. Being overlooked lands not as a professional slight, but as a fundamental injustice, because the recognition is not just professional, it is existential. The fifth emotion in the permissive profile is boredom. And I want to frame it in a way that may feel uncomfortable. The permissive OS experiences boredom as a near constant companion, not because life is actually boring, but because the malware needs boredom to perform a specific function. Genuine development requires sustained effort on things that do not come naturally. It requires being a beginner. It requires struggling before you are competent. It requires not being immediately excellent at something that matters to you. That sequence, that struggle before competence, is the most threatening possible experience for the permissive OS. Because if you struggle, that means you're not as exceptional as you believe. And if you're not as exceptional as you believed, then what are you? The malware cannot allow that question to be answered, so it redirects. It reframes the struggle as evidence that the work is beneath you. It calls the discomfort boredom. It suggests that the reason this feels hard is not that you are growing, but that you are in the wrong environment. And you pack up and move to the next thing where you are briefly exceptional again until the next growth edge disappears and the pattern repeats. The malware would rather call it boredom than call it fear, because that's what it is. Boredom in this profile, fear is fear wearing an exceptional mask. The malware voice says, this is not stimulating. I'm not learning anything here. A person of my abilities should be somewhere that actually challenges them. In the description below, you'll find links to this research, as well as a link to a longer video. I hope you check that out. The sixth emotion is fragility. Identity built on praise is structurally fragile. Honest feedback tends to land harder and stay longer than it should. Not because this leader is thin-skinned, but because feedback is touching something deeper than the specific work being critiqued. It's touching their identity, and the identity does not yet have a foundation that can hold honest input without threatening the entire structure. The most expensive thing the permissive OS does is protect a person from the development he most needs. Every challenge gets reframed as being the wrong environment rather than evidence that growth is required. Every difficulty becomes the environment's problem rather than the operating systems. And so the person moves on from job to job, from relationship to relationship, city to city, always carrying the same operating system and wondering why the same problems keep appearing in different places. And here's what I want to say about the upgrade for this profile. The upgrade is not humility in the popular sense. It is not learning to shrink, to take up less space, to stop believing in your gifts. Your gifts are real. The upgrade is foundational. It is building an internal sense of worth that can hold honest feedback without collapsing, that can sustain effort on something difficult without reframing the difficulty as evidence you're in the wrong place, that you can let someone else have the room for an hour without reading it as a threat. The gifts are the same. The capacity to develop them is entirely different depending on whether the identity is built on sand or on bedrock. That foundation is buildable. It is built on choosing growth over comfort repeatedly in small contexts until the nervous system learns that struggle is not a verdict. It is just the work. In the description below, you'll find a link to a longer video and references for this material. If you like the video, please subscribe, share it with someone you think might benefit from hearing it, hit the bell so you never miss a video, and thank you for tuning in.